Hit my pretend gavel.
Oh, you want me to?
No, I'm good.
There you go.
No, I'm good. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome to the New Hanover County Policy Committee meeting. Ms. Joy, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Boyer,
Here.
Ms. Craybill,
Here.
and Mr. Wildebohr.
Present.
A quorum is present. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look over those. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is agreed to. The next item on our agenda, and I'm very excited about this, is our student voice presentation.
Oh, Mr. Boyer, before you go, I just wanted to welcome Chris Madden, who is the principal representing NC Papa today, and another one of his Principal of the Year duties, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And up on the dais also, we have Jarrell Lewis, who's going to be talking about a policy. We've got, Miss Walker, who was joining us, and we have Dr. Casey Smith, who will also be a co-presenter with the student voice people. So thank you.
Dr. Smith, are the students here? Are they running a little behind?
They're awake. I think they're on there. We've got 4, actually. Zoom was really
Great.
helpful for them because we have one up at ECU doing summer courses and one getting ready for basketball practice at 10 a.m. So I think that, is Tanea on there? I can't quite tell. Tanea was
I'm here.
All right, Tanea, you want to get us started?
Do you think that you could have who's on the line just introduce themselves so we can know who they are?
I think she was going to introduce.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I am Tanea June. I will be a sophomore at Laney High School this year. Along with us, we have Cassidy, who goes to Hoggard. We have Salmon, who goes to Hoggard as well. And we have Benji, who goes to Laney. So today, we just want to present our policy to you. And there are some new things on our policy that we chose to add based on the implementation, certain departments that we need to help with those jobs, and the inclusion of elementary levels along with this project. We also would like to, before we start, to connect the strategic plan that you guys created along with our policy and how they all connect. So for me, I started with the academic performance, which was goal 1. For me, I didn't necessarily find anything specific that went along with this plan. But what I saw is that there was a lot of high quality curriculum that you guys wanted to start and that you guys wanted to implement into our schools. And I think when it comes to our student engagement team, we really want high quality performance with our group. We really want students to have high quality education when it comes to what we do and understand what we do. So that's for goal 1. That's how I connected that part of the plan to our policy. Now I'll kick it off to Benji to explain goal 2.
So goal 2 is student safety. So Student Voices has proposed a policy for representation of students on each committee making decisions about our schools. This policy directly relates to the second goal of the strategic plan, which is students' safety and wellness. This goal is to promote safe schools, facilities, and services impacting students. Students are the majority, yet there is currently no place for students to have influence. To have a valuable student feedback with regard to discipline measures, suspension, restraint, and SRO intervention, mental health, self-harm, bullying, and etc. could have the potential to make a huge impact. This year, we have had at least one student pass away by suicide, and students grieved alone and together. We have had a school shooting that affected the students and the entire district. We've had aggressive explodes with regard to pride groups and concerns about drug use and sexual assault, yet there's very little opportunity for students to be a part of those discussions and plans for prevention. Things such as good nutrition, health and wellness, and impact students, where it could be beneficial for students to share insight about the WHAT program and other concerns related to mental health. Students have great ideas about cafeteria food and how to make improvements there. It would be helpful to have student impact and feedback regarding facility and operational needs, and helping identify student safety concerns and their needs. Students could share strategies regarding bus transportation and how problem solve certain situations. Students make up the majority and have a wealth of ideas and perspective to help create safer schools through prevention programs and social environment learning. Perhaps the most important missing piece from student voices is making a positive change impact safety and helping leadership make positive change in sharing and engaging in discussion. This would be one of the many goals of the policy we are proposing. Now I will turn it over to goal 3 for
I think, Simon,
Simon,
it's your
jump
turn
in.
on goal 4. They looked at all the goals of the strategic plan and wanted to pull out the 3 that were most relevant to the policy. So, Simon, you're on goal 4.
Yeah, for sure. For goal 4, which is the equity and diversion and inclusion, the first thing I read there was if the schoolwork or work site is inclusive, equitable, and diverse, students and staff have a strong sense of belonging and connectedness, and that's kind of what we're striving for. So your mission with that really aligns with ours for sure. In 4.1, you guys said about ensuring that we establish the equity teams and giving funding to that. That's something that we'll be working with our student engagement team, is the equity group, which, as you can see on the document. And you guys mentioned the student voice project suggestions group, as well as the hosting the fall and spring student equity convenings for biannual meetings, and that's something else we've mentioned. So a lot of what you guys have mentioned in this section, part 4, is a lot of what we're also going to be implementing, and it coincides well.
I'm going to just prompt Cassidy in case she had anything else to share. She wasn't able to join the group last night. So Cassidy, did you have anything else that you noticed from the strategic plan?
Yeah, especially for part 1, which Shania talked about. I think, as students, we've lived through the school system. We know what works and what doesn't, and we have helpful feedback to offer about our education and how schools run, and because we've lived through it. So we know firsthand a lot of the things that work for us in terms of what gets us to have better academic performance, and we have feedback about school safety and all of these different issues. So that's why it's so important, and that's really our goal for this project, is to just get student feedback in all of these areas, because we have valuable things to say and we want to work with you guys. So that's basically our goal for all of this, that we just wanted to set up before we start talking about the policy.
And I think before that dialogue starts, there was just one other thing that Benji was going to try to address. I think in your packet, you received a visual accompanying the policy. So Benji, you want to take a second to explain that?
So the Student Voice Project is a policy, and this visual shows how the student voice structures are proposing to connect to one another. We are including, you can read through the structure written in the policy, and there are some that already exist, and then there are others that are new. We are hoping that the county will adopt these and make student voices more structured and authentic.
right.
So now, are you guys ready to go into the actual policy itself, or are you ready to field questions?
I
From
think we're ready to hear your questions because I think you guys have already gotten the policy and read through it maybe, and we presented it last time. So just what are your questions? What your feedback?
So I will open it up to my fellow board members. Does anybody have a question? Mr. Wildebohr?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. First off, I'd like to say, before asking my question, I'd like for this policy to be able to last in place no matter the outcome of the November elections. With that in mind, I'm very excited to add and respect student voice, but this document seems to really focus only on student equity teams. I think we've forgotten some major players, and that's what I brought up when we talked about it before. I don't see SGA, for instance. SGA, we have equity teams that are picked by adults. The SGA, for instance, is a student voice that is, I don't see it in here. And I mean, I think that's where students get to elect other students to lead them. I mean, I really think that needs to be looked at. I think that the whole premise of this document is outstanding, and I do want to thank the students and the adults working with them for this document. But I also would like to ask, it's all under equity. And I mean, student voice to me lends itself to communications. We want to communicate with the students. We want to hear from the students. I can see where equity is a part of that, but I don't think that, I think we should have the communications department, excuse me, communications department be the driving force as far as who they're going to answer to, not the chief officer of equity. But again, yeah, and before I'm told by one of my colleagues, which I'm sure I'm going to hear, we don't want to get down into the weeds and start saying, well, we got to add SGA, we got to add this. We've got student equity teams mentioned everywhere here. So, I mean, I do think we need to mention that. And I mean, I also, as I said before, I think we need to be able to find an avenue to get other voices. Student equity team, yes. Student government, yes. FCA, yes. The student that's sitting in actually high school and doesn't really want to be there, we need to find an avenue to include them. I mean, not just we're going to send them a survey. If they answer it, they do. If they don't, they don't. You know, and do I have an answer on exactly how to do that? No, but at least the major players, at least the SGA and some of these other organizations. I mean, as I had written down some others, academic groups. What about the French club and the German club? And what about the band? You know, why not have some kind of representation so we can actually have a diverse group that we can hear from? I mean, I want to hear from all the students, not some and that kind of thing. So, and how we can do that whole thing, I know that's a huge mountain I'm putting in front of you, but I think that that's what we need to really strive for, so that this policy is not going to be, yeah, I have no idea what's going to happen in November, but I don't want something that we have from now until November and then it's picked apart in November, possibly. So I think this is a great start, but I would like to see some more work done on it.
I have several comments, but I have given those comments to the students already. So I would like to hear from the folks in central office who will be, and of course, Mr. Madden, who has the students, you know, in his building and represents the principals that will have people in their buildings, because all of us are going to be the ones that support them. So I would like for you guys to just jump in, because I feel like that the students have addressed, you know, by looking at the strategic plan, that they want student engagement on the curriculum committee if they could, or through their student councils. And they do say that, you know, throughout here. And they even talk about, you know, the student councils at elementary schools, you know, to provide. So if you guys don't mind jumping in like you normally do on other policies, I would appreciate that feedback, because maybe you'll answer my questions.
So I'm happy to jump in first. I think that it's important to note that at least we strive to do very few things at central office in isolation, and I think this is representative of one of those things. So whatever this becomes and whatever the will of the board is with regard to student voice and their participation, I think Dr. Casey Smith would maybe agree that central to that is a good and solid point of contact in central office to ensure that these programs don't founder. And so whatever that looks like, I think we'll support, but I think it will take all of us, and I think we will absolutely need to leverage the expertise of whoever the incoming chief of equity, diversity, and inclusion may be. But I'm not here to assign roles. I just think that it takes all of us talking about what right looks like to ensure that things like this don't lose momentum or fall by the wayside, and having that point of contact is going to be necessary. That's my 2 cents. Julie, I think you might be hopping in.
So as we get talking, you're looking for, and I think all of us are looking for, who would be the subject matter expert. You know, like it's under policy 4, you know, the 4000 series, which would be, you know, Ms. Barnum. But just because you're the subject matter expert doesn't mean you operate in a vacuum. So if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. And I think that's well said by Josh or Mr. Smith. This is going to have to be a collaborative effort, and we're going to want to look for multiple avenues to have student involvement, not just communication, but involvement and input. And I think some of the true hurdles that I think we really have to put out there to make sure that this can be successful is, you know, ensuring that we are inviting the right students, and that if those students aren't participating, there's a kind of another row, like another string that comes in. Really wanted to have student involvement with grading practices policy, and it was really difficult to have consistent involvement. We had a couple that were really consistent, but even in one of the student voice activities, talking about it, multiple students said, I'm really interested. But it's really difficult to have those commitments with the different types of schedules that we all have. So having a 4 to 6 o'clock meeting sometimes doesn't work for students that have after school activities. So how do we support with not just logistics, but also with quality communication through multiple avenues for our students? I think those are things we would need to consider. Also, you know, I think it's also important to identify that there is a superintendent's student advisory that is active and has been utilized this year for input when we were working through projects with the county related to school safety and community safety, bringing those students in and having quality conversations, pulling them into strategic conversations with county staff on what they believe is going to be important. So I think we have pieces of this. I think we need to round it out with some logistics on point person, you know, where does the support belong, and how do we make sure we schedule successfully for our students to participate?
Yeah, because 4 to 6 is after school, but then if we have meetings, you know, 8 to 9, then that's school time, you know, so it's a balance.
Thank you very much thus far for everybody's comments. I would like to just, you know, getting deeper into this actual policy. First, let's say, I understand, I agree with what you're saying with regards to an all-encompassing viewpoint from students, but, you know, I think this is one more touch point. This isn't the end-all, be-all. I do think we do get those other pieces. We do hear from our band students, and, you know, with regards to how difficult it is to bring some of these students in, I think the equity officer is probably a pretty good place to start with that initial touch point. And again, it's holistic. That's just the main conduit, I think, for this piece. With regards to some of the specific proposals, I think it's really good. I have some concerns about students actually voting on our committees. I think the ex officio title is probably a better way to begin with this process. I think there are some legal questions about voting on committees, but I don't know if anybody has any thoughts with regards to that.
Dr. Faison.
Dr. Faison?
I apologize because it's kind of going back, but one of the things that I think we need to make sure we incorporate too is to educate the students. I think we could have better conversations, and if they understand some of the ramifications and the policies and the things we can and can't do, because we want to make sure that their voices are heard. So the more they know about how to advocate and things that are possible, the better. So I just want to make sure that that's a piece. I don't know if we put it in policy, but there's certain things we're gonna have to do to make sure they understand how the business works.
That's correct.
Thank you.
That's correct, thank you.
Nelson, I think, Ms. Walker.
Ms. Walker?
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, student voice came out of EDI, and I think that's a natural home for it. I mean, as far as the expert in administration that we're looking for. But also, I think having these other voices, as Mr. Wildebohr talked about, is important, but we already know they're there and established. I think what this is a student-led initiative, and I think the whole time is what we were craving, at least in our realm here, is more student voice, and especially from students that don't necessarily get to speak up and say things that they really want to say. I know SGA is very important. You know, my daughter didn't graduate, she graduated not that long ago, and I know a lot of the time it's a little bit more of a popularity contest, which is fine. The students are very qualified to be there. But I know sometimes we miss out on a lot of voices, and that was naturally why it came out of EDI. And I'm very proud of what the kids have been doing. I think they have worked extra hard on this. I think they look to us to find out what they can and can't do, really. But I think establishing a policy for them, I think, should be done sooner rather than later, since we've been working on this for a long time. I don't have any questions. I mean, I think they're looking really to us to get this policy through and bring it to the board. So I think we should be directing questions at them.
Mr. Wildebohr?
First off, Mr. Boyer, I would concur. I think that, you know, the voting idea, I think your idea is outstanding on that. I would like to concur with most of my colleagues here, but I would like to kind of go back to, you know, that I have a concern just that we're having adults pick students to be part of this versus letting the students pick the students to be, you know, at least be a part of this. I would, you know, I definitely hear what Ms. Walker is saying. Hopefully they're not popularity contests any more than, you know, the Board of Education is, but that's how we do it in America, is we elect and we vote on and we elect people to offices. And I think I'm gonna hammer on that, because I think that's an important part, that's an avenue where students actually get to pick other students to be their voice versus a counselor or a principal. And principals, I love principals and counselors, but I think we do need, and I'm not saying we don't have that piece, but we also need to have the piece where the students get to say, hey, Sue is our person or Johnny is our person, and we think that their voice is, you know, I want them to lead me. I think they're an outstanding leader. And maybe, you know, maybe that's, you know, we have both. I mean, I don't have a problem with having both. I do have a problem with it just being equity team after equity team. That's can be a piece, but it doesn't need to be the total pie, and that's my piece. And I know, as my learned colleague said, you know, I know we can't have, and you're going to have this committee, this committee, and this committee, but I mean, the SGA is a huge part of what I think needs to be part of this conversation, so.
Ms.
Okay,
Craybill?
so, yeah, a couple things. So if we don't mind, you know, back to the policy itself, I'd like to go ahead and do what I always do, is provide my feedback on the actual words that are in here and not on the concepts and my thoughts. So if we go to, and you guys, whoever wants to speak, then you guys just jump right in. Let's look at Section B, Principals Supporting the Policy. And maybe I am just a education novice. What did you mean in 1, 2, 3, the third line, where it says student voices structure seek cooperation, collaboration, and co-construction between students and adults at the school board level, etc. I'm just wondering, I'm not certain I understand what co-construction means and what your thoughts were on what your intentions were with that noun.
I think we just meant like, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, you're good.
Go ahead.
I think we just mean like, when we create, I don't know, we just want to work with the board and work with adults to create different ideas and different things. I think that's just what we meant, is more like collaboration. It was just
Okay.
another word we used.
All right, yeah, there's so many school words that I just didn't know how that fit in here. And so keeping on, when it says at the school board level, et cetera, wondering, do we need that line, or do you only want to be at the school board level, or would you, could we leave that line out so that it leaves you the latitude to offer feedback at your school level and at the district level? Would that be something that you would consider taking that line out, or elaborate, or having another sentence to elaborate that? Because what I think I'm hearing you say is that you want to be in on the decisions, and frankly, most of the decisions that you would want to be in on are not at the school board level. They are at your school level or at the district level. What do you think about that?
Right, I agree for sure. And I think going off the co-construction thing, I think with that, we use that word to represent how we don't want to be just like there for show, kind of going back to the tokenism thing where we're like agreeing to everything necessarily. I think we use that word just to emphasize like kind of our equal role in creating, and not just creating, but like listening to your opinions and vice versa. So I think that was just another word we used to emphasize a more equal relationship.
Okay.
I would leave that in.
No, I don't mind. I just
I would
wanted to
leave
hear
that
your
in only
thoughts.
because they're already involved with their schools and making decisions at the school level, and this is a board-specific policy.
Well, no, and you guys jump in, correct me if I'm wrong, that it was my understanding that they just want it codified, that their roles don't go away depending on who is sitting up here and who is sitting in Dr. Faust's seat. So, and not all schools have a good student representation or strong student representation at their schools. Is that right, guys?
Correct.
So, yeah, so I think it's important that we clarify that, because their picture is not quite, does not quite say that the superintendent's council is somebody from each school, which has been going on all year long. Dr. Faust, how often do you guys meet?
Well, I have a question.
Oh, you do? Go ahead. Okay.
So my question is, what would be different than the actual council that we already have?
Well, like you guys said, you mentioned, we mentioned equity a lot, but we meant to keep the student engagement team really open-ended so we can involve, the SGA, the band kids, and the Ashley kid that doesn't want to join. That's why we left it more open-ended and broadened that perspective. And we didn't want students to necessarily have to join a club because, like you said, that could be a popularity contest and such. So we meant the difference would almost be that it's open to everybody. In our policy, I believe we said it's not limited to, those equity groups that we mentioned. And the selection of those students, we wanted it to be accessible to students who might only be passionate about one specific thing, or the curriculum or grading committee, something. That way they don't have to be pressured to join a club or be voted by their students or peers to do something. They can also speak out just if they have an interest in it. So I think that would be the difference.
So that you're saying that was the difference in what the superintendent student council does now versus, would this be a different council than the one that already exists?
So our policy in Part D, you'll see we have 5 different structures, and some of them are things that already exist. So like the superintendent student advisory council, that will still run how it runs, maybe get even more involved, but we have new things as well. Like Part 2, we talk about Part 3, we talk about having students on board committees. So that's a new thing, so that we can get students involved in all the issues that are being talked about. And we also have Part 4, which is our overarching group of the student engagement team, which can be students, any student from any school, middle and high school. They can be students from the student equity team, the superintendent's advisory council, but also additional students, because a lot of these questions that you guys are bringing up, we've thought about so much. We want to include every student, and we want this to be a big group. So 4 is the overarching group. That 4 and 3 are the new things we are proposing, and 5. 3, 4, and 5 are the new ones, and then 1 and 2 are things that are already existing.
Okay, so, all right, oh, did you have to? All right, so if we're looking at that, we currently don't have an elementary representative. And I think some of the, I mean, not that the elementary voice is not, needed and necessary, but the getting their commitment, getting them to meetings might be more difficult. Would you think that I thought about the student councils and the student leadership teams, or whatever the principal calls their leadership team at the elementary, just to get some information, and then they can pass that up to the superintendent's advisory. That's kind of what I was thinking there. But so let's look at number 3. Question I had there was ensure that at least 2 high school students on every board committee that reports directly to the board. So we're going to be talking later about what those board committees are. So I wanted, back to Dr. Faison's education of the process, you need to know what those committees are and what they do for that. But I would like to suggest that we talk about not only board committees, but board advisory committees, which, you had talked about the curriculum committee, the grading practices. So wondering if you guys, I know you've thought about it a lot, but would you be interested in changing that word to board committees or district committees? Because there's a lot more committees, like we talked about at the summit. We have at least 10 10 different student opportunities for inclusion in there. So that's what do you guys think about that?
Can I chime in before they answer that? That it might be helpful to just have clarification, because I serve on a board committee and I still don't even know all the committees.
Right.
And I know that the vote, though, perhaps fear, establishes a little bit of fear in adults, it is very important to them. And I know the legal question was brought up, and to my knowledge, as far as the general statute at the state level, we have not been able to verify for certain. I don't think that it has been, brought up anywhere in North Carolina what they're proposing. So I think we could seek additional clarification on that, because I know the vote is very important to them. So the question is, before they answer your question, could you clarify what the actual, which are the committees that are directly tied to the school board, and then which would be, I guess, like senior admin or ad hoc and others?
Can you pull that up for us, Kim? If you go to the, and maybe we don't do it tonight, but that would be something we can talk about. But if you go to the board's website and you click on board, and then on the left-hand side, there's a listing of all of the different kinds of things like meetings, agendas, policy manual, and then there's a tab called committees. And if you click on the tab called committees, then, thank you, Kim. So we're looking on committees, there we go. And so we click on committees. And then on the left-hand side there, you see a listing of all of our board and board advisory committees. You can click on those, and we are in varying states of array and disarray completion on those. But if you can scroll just a little bit, Kim, you can see the other committees on the right-hand side. So there are, and these are just ways at the district level. And if you are not on a board committee, then you can vote. But most of our committees don't really vote. They do, not board committees, but advisories, they don't really vote. They do consensus kind of voting. Is that right? With those of you, it's basically you talk about it and you all come to consensus. You capture that in a group memory of some form. So that way you do have a vote. But Mr. Shive, if you'd like to weigh in on actual board committees and being an extension of the board itself, then that might be helpful.
I have a question for Casey after that,
okay.
if you don't mind.
Yeah, so good morning. So I think that it really comes down to whether or not any actions being taken that could be considered action by the board. If, it's not really a vote by the board, quote unquote, if it's just a recommendation to the full board. And like an advisory committee, if the advisory committee is making, developing some consensus, whether it be by a vote or just through discussion, to then make a recommendation to the board, having a non-board member be it a student or some other citizen, I don't think that raises a legal issue. I think if there's any time that, so it really depends on what the subject matter is. If there's any time that the board is deliberating and then voting, and that could be considered action by the Board of Education itself, then I would not advise that we have any non-board member participating in that vote.
So can I ask Casey?
Ms. Walker?
Thank you, Colin.
Oh, thank you.
Ms. Walker?
I was going to ask, you guys did research and you had some people, didn't you have a student from Mecklenburg County that had some, I don't know if they had voting power or what. I know there were some students from Student Voice that came and talked to you guys.
Yeah, Charlotte Mecklenburg has probably the most just innovative model, at least in North Carolina, for similar to what our students are proposing. But that student is, I think, what are they called? That they don't have a vote on the board, but they do sit up there with the board. I think they're called a student advisor.
Student advisor.
Is it, what was Colin's last name?
Shive.
Shive. Mr. Shive, according to what you just said, do I understand it that any board, basically any board committee that's doing any actual business of the board would only have a vote from board members? There would never be votes by anybody else, no matter what their age or what their status in our community?
Correct.
Okay.
Like today, whatever we decide with any of the policies, the only people that actually vote are Mr. Boyer, Mr. Wildeboer, and myself. But anybody else can.
Right, even if it comes out of committee, the full board has to approve it no matter what.
Yeah.
So in the end, the board makes policy. So it's just, it would just be a student vote.
Say that loud for people. The board makes.
Well, the board in the end always makes policy, but what I'm trying to say is, even if students were a part of committees that did vote to bring things out of committee, it's not final until the board actually does make but having the vote, the weigh-in of a student on a committee, I think is important, because, I mean, say you had a couple students on policy committee, and you were looking at a policy that was important well, they all are important to students, I know that, but if there were particular questions, like I think there used to be a dress code committee, or things that are need student feedback, I think having it right there all the time is, I think, better. And like I said, it's not as if you're giving away power when you give a vote on a committee. You're just getting that input with their student vote, if that makes sense.
So real quick, looking at section C of 3, selection determined by Chief Equity Office in collaboration with other divisions, as well as committee chair people and students. Mr. Wildeboer, I don't know if this addresses your concerns, but that vaguely sounds like a committee. I don't know if you would be satisfied if we just created a student voice selection committee, where we have one board member, the chief equity officer, and the other divisions as necessary.
If I could, thank you, sir.
I don't know if that would satisfy you, but.
Well, I mean, I think that would be a good start. I think, like I say, I'm still going to say, I think the communications, student voice to me, kind of yells communications. I have no problem with the chief equity officer being part of that, because I'm actually looking, I don't know if you guys have, and I had not clicked on this before and seen this, but the selection criteria and processes used for the 2021 Student Voice Project group actually talks about, and I don't know whether the students came up with this or who came up with this, but diversity in lived experience. I'm not exactly what that is, but you can get up to 10 points for that. Leadership capability, you only get 5 as a max. Commitment likelihood, you can get up to 8. Again, I think we need to have leaders in this. And I mean, when you have, diversity is important. I'm not saying it isn't. And I don't know exactly what in lived experiences that is, exactly what that is. If that's just diversity, or if that's diversity in experiences, or maybe that's what that is. But I mean, that's important. But I don't know that in my personal thought, I'm not too sure that's twice as important as leadership capabilities, and then commitment. So, I mean, I think it would be good to have a commitment, a committee. I would agree with you to kind of help form this.
So let me get the student perspective, but I will just say leadership is important, yes, but you just said you wanted the voice of the student from Ashwee who didn't want to be there.
Right.
That's not necessarily somebody with innate leadership skills, but it's somebody with an important piece that they definitely want to contribute. So,
great. I'm saying maybe balance these. I'm not saying that throw one out at all, but I'm saying I think that they're all important, but I don't know that, the one is twice as important as the other. That's all I'm saying. I think that they all are very important.
Well, I would just like briefly to get the student perspective. Would that be something that, this is the policy that you all are proposing? Would a selection committee, since you've listed several entities here, the equity officer, other divisions, communication, committee people, students, would a selection committee be something that you might be interested in terms of making sure we get good representation with student voice?
Yeah, I think that's something we're interested in. And going off of what he was saying, I think we can rearrange the numbers and points or whatever, but I think the lived-in experience, that was more about like bringing up the leaders, like, the Ashley kids that aren't leaders already. Part of this is also raising the level of every student and giving them that option. So I think if a committee for selecting those students is going to be helpful for us and it's going to be diverse, and I think that's something we will consider.
Mr. Madden, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add also, it is important to us that students are involved in selecting the group as well. Like we want, like a selection group would be great as well, but if students can be involved in that, creating the selection process, that would be really important to us as well.
So, Mr. Madden, you are involved at your school, I'm sure, in helping bringing up the leaders. So how do you go about at your school in selecting students to go to the Superintendent's Advisory Council or to your student teams?
Those are high school students.
Oh, it's not middle school? Okay.
Superintendent or
Never mind.
junior and seniors.
Okay, so they are proposing middle school to be a part of this too, so, okay. So how about your equity teams? How do you select your students for that?
In conference with other faculty, other staff members. So I think in advocating for the students here and for individual schools, I think that we are equipped at the school level to select a diverse group of students that would represent all of our population. I think that's part of what our role is as school leaders, is to be able to decipher who should be part of that and discern which individuals to conference with, whether it be counselors, teachers, lead teachers, potentially coaches, whoever it may be at our school level, to make sure that we had a diverse representation. So I do think that in that as well, I hear what Mr. Wildeboer is saying with the student voice, and I hear the students saying they're open to having student voice as well for the selection of that. So I think that there's a way to kind of meet all the needs that have been brought up here today and still allow the schools. I see Chief Equity Officer a lot in there, but I think that the schools really should be selecting who is representing the individual schools, because they know the students the best.
And their demographics are different, and their needs are different.
Very much so.
Okay, well, that brings us to the point that Dr. Faust just made, that, and I wasn't aware that your superintendent advisory was, or I didn't remember, that it was just for high school students. So part of this policy is suggesting adding middle school students. So what are your thoughts on that?
So there are, and I mean, I would be okay with having two, because there are certain things that we do specifically just for the students at the high school level, for instance, like the, and then, well, I won't say for instance, but then there are things that would be conducive for a middle schooler. The conversations are a little different, and what I would not want to do, not that there are anything that's out there, but the conversations are different in what they want versus what they would want at the middle school level.
Right. So are you suggesting
We'll
two
just do
advisories or
we'll
no?
just have, yeah, we could do two advisories.
Yeah, like middle school and high school. Okay, so that
This
could be
one,
workable.
this one does. So this one has 25 students from each of the high schools, and it's just array. It doesn't matter. So we typically don't solicit the students who are at the very top of the class. We want those who are in the middle to low. I mean, but of course there are students who are at the top. So we get a wide range of students from those conversations. And if you'll know, those were students that were actually on the grading policy. Oh, yeah. So those students were there in there. So they get a little, I mean, they're very much active But I think it would be okay to have two. We can run two it simultaneously.
Okay, so we would just need to alter the policy to, the policy proposal to add that in. I do see something down here in number 4, add student voice to the monthly regular Board of Education agenda. And so I can see that as perhaps, maybe not monthly, but monthly if we want, or quarterly. Our meetings get really long, so perhaps quarterly to have that under committee reports, or have that as an information, item that we can do on a regular basis. That to me is something that's.
No, I think they need to be up here and giving us a report every month.
Yes.
Okay, so then.
I think it's important enough.
Okay, well, but what I'm saying is that's easy to do.
Yes.
It's easy to add in either under information or under committee reports if we give them a name of a committee. So I would like to see in here somewhere that you guys are talking about. I was really glad that you took time to look at the strategic plan and see how you all fit in as a stakeholder. I would also like to see somewhere that you include in your policy being involved on your school improvement teams, at your own schools, because that's where the action takes place with that. And you don't, and if there's anything that you guys are talking about that students don't need to hear, like personnel issues or things like that, then they could just be excused from that conversation. But would you guys be amenable to discussing that?
And Ms. Crable, can we just get Mr. Shive to make sure that that's, because I know what you said, I think it makes a lot of sense, but I want to make sure that there's not a legal, because I know there's certain things with school improvement teams you can and cannot do. So can we just double check with him and make sure that would be legally okay?
Mr. Shive?
The question is whether or not we can have students be members of the school improvement team?
Yes.
Right? Yeah, so let me look up the statute on that, because I know on composition. Please give me one moment while I pull that up.
And even if they can't be on the team, they should have an avenue for maybe a teacher liaison for providing their information, to the school improvement team. Because that's, Mr. Madden, kind of drove that point home, is they know their schools and they know what's going on. So, would that be viable to just get their input if they're not allowed to be on your team?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And if it's legal, then I think it would be great to have, we have parent representatives on our school
Right.
improvement team, so it'd be great to have a student voice as well.
Yeah.
Ms. Walker?
Thank you. I think the main point about this is giving them a seat at the table, students, codifying that into our, what you would call laws, and making sure that we listen to student voice. I think that's one of the main things about this. This is not just about the selection part. I mean, we have to work out all the little details here, I understand. But when we codify it in our laws, it makes them part of what we talk about all the time. And to their point, they're the biggest stakeholder here. And we want to hear their voices as much as possible, because I think that's really been missing in our conversations. Although we do have advisory councils and we do have, I think this actually just it tells everybody that this board has made a stand to say we want student voice. And I think that's the main thing that we really got to consider.
Okay, so
Yes. So next steps moving forward before we're at our time with this policy. Before we move on, next steps, do you think, and I'll just poll my committee members, do you think we are in a position to present something to the board in 2 weeks at our next board meeting? Or do you think we need to present something at our September board meeting?
If I'm the next person to speak, thank you, sir. Mr. Chair, I would really like to see it in a very passable position. I think we have some questions. I think they need to be addressed. So I would like to see it, instead of putting it out in front of the board and then having to go through it again and take things apart and say, I really have a concern here, or I have a concern there. I would rather see it, taken back with the students, let them work out some of the questions that were raised. I do thank you so much for being here today and taking notes. And then, going ahead and having something that we can all say yes. And going back to my original point, I would like to see something that, and I think that's what they want, is something that would stand the test of time. And I think we have some concerns here that we could address, and then it will stand the test of time. So I would like to see it, as you said, in the September meeting.
Okay. Ms. Crabbill?
Yeah, I think that this should be held in committee, and then we can get some advisement from the superintendent on who that subject matter expert might be, because going forward, I think the students don't need to be working in a vacuum anymore. They need to have some guidance from other than everyone, on that. So I would like to see it held in committee and let them work on it and come back to us in August at our August policy committee meeting with the questions that we had, the questions that we posed. Let them think about what that looks like and means to them, and then we talk it about again in August, and we might be in a better position to make this in a form that we can pass. Because right now, I don't believe it's in a form that we can pass.
Okay.
Could say one more thing?
Yeah.
If you don't mind. Thank you, sir. And I just want to really applaud the students that have answered the questions, because I think that they've had some excellent answers. I think we just need to get them on paper. Everyone that has answered has had some great insight and some great answers. So I do want to, hopefully, we're not upsetting you, or I think that this is something that you've done a great job on. I think we just need to continue to improve it slightly. So I just want
Ms.
to say
Walker?
that.
Thank you. I want to ask the students and/or Casey, do you have your questions that you need to come back with? Do you feel like you guys, I know you've worked very, very, very hard on it. I just want to make sure that we have the opportunity now to find out what needs to be answered so we can get closer to passing this. And when it comes up the next policy committee meeting, then we might be ready by September to bring it to the board.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I definitely have a lot of notes, and I know the students were taking notes as well. So do you guys have any specific questions, points of clarification for this committee before we close out?
I just do have one. I don't know if it's a question as much as a recommendation. We have all of our subject matter experts up here at every board meeting, and I think the subject matter experts of our students are our students. So I didn't see an area where we'd have, and I know, we have a monthly report, which I still want to keep. I think that's great. I don't know if there's a way to have a student representative, sitting somewhere. I don't know if it's up here or there, but someone we can turn to say, okay, we're talking about facilities. Hey, how does that look when you're going to and from a class? Somebody that we can actually get information from in real time. I don't know if that's something you'd considered or the committee had considered.
In terms of the actual school board?
Yes.
In like a regular school board meeting?
Yes.
A sitting seat for an individual, is that what you're asking?
Somewhere, yes. I don't know about the logistics of where they'd sit or
So-
anything, but somebody we can go to and get real-time information from a student if we need it.
But just to be clear, Mr. Boyer, a subject matter expert, as we are using it in our policy development and structure, is someone from the central office staff.
Yes, I
It-
understand.
So it can't be just Joe off the street, Joe student. It doesn't say anywhere in this policy, to your point, that a student will sit on the dais. So we need to have that clearly, written in there. So, so those, do you kids have any more students? Do you have any more questions? I know this is really the way you want to spend your summer break, and we appreciate you getting up and doing this. But if you have any more questions, if you want to ask them right now, or just funnel them into Dr. Smith, and she could get them to the policy committee.
Yeah, just a quick question. Chairperson Crable, I think you had mentioned a term change you wanted for the
Yes.
students on the board or advisory committee. So can you correct me if I'm wrong? That was almost to just expand our role, right? Like not just on the board committee, but also be on the list of those 10 advisory committees that you said, which we wouldn't be voting on per se, but we would be doing the consensus and helping make decisions.
Yeah, my thoughts there when I mentioned to you about term limits was the 4 other policies that I read from the other school districts that are doing it. They had term limits that a student, just like the board members have term limits, and we are working, and you'll hear it a little bit with board committees, is that we need to have a start and an end time. Like if you're elected as a junior, do you automatically get to go to be, and a senior to stay on the advisory, or are we going to turn over every year, or are we going to turn over half and half? That's what I was looking at for that, so that people are clear on what their commitment is. So that was my question that I posed to you guys about term limits. Does that make sense?
So-
Thanks, Salman. Cassidy, Tanea, Benji, do you guys have any other questions or points to add?
This
Sure,
isn't
for
your
that
last
good wait
opportunity.
time on Zoom.
Yeah, this isn't your last opportunity. There's plenty of time to, ask us all questions.
I just wanted to close out, just to clarify, as an adult ally, and specifically for Mr. Wildeboer, your reference earlier to wondering about the selection criteria and other things, being developed. As an adult ally, like, we take a whole lot of pride in our, professional responsibility to really lead with inquiry. So that, that's what we have tried to do throughout this whole process, and just be alongside the students and co-constructing. There's that word from earlier. So thank you guys so much for your time and your support of our students. And is that August 9th? We'll be
Yes.
back? Okay.
And it'll be 9 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you all.
And I would, I think this is really important, obviously. As chair, my intention would be to bring this to the board in September. I think it's important that we commit to that. So, I don't know if we'll probably have to do another hour, another 45 minutes, or however long it takes, but I really do want to bring something forward. I think we're close. I think we have some bones, so I would just encourage committee members to work on this, make your corrections, make your concerns, and we can bring a policy forward. So as soon as practical, as soon as possible. All right, moving on. Next,
Are we voting officially to keep this?
we do not have to vote to not take action.
But we have to put it on this sheet and to capture it in the minutes.
Yes.
So are we putting it, policies held in committee?
It is held in committee.
Okay.
All right. Our next item on the agenda are policy updates. First item is policy 7805, the superintendent evaluation. This is a policy that was held in committee from last month. I will turn it over to board members or committee members for questions, or board members if there are any. It's a very short policy. Mr. Wildeboer, do you have a comment on policy 7805?
Okay, so am I looking at 7805, this one or the other one?
It's the other one.
So you can, just
Okay.
for clarity, in our packet, we got the NCSBA proposed policy that many districts across the state use. We got the policy that Mr. Shive put together for us to simplify that. And yes, those are the two that we have. And I also pulled up and brought with me, and anybody who's watching at home can follow along. In the old policy manual, it is policy 1820, and that is the policy that we are currently operating under, just for FYI, because we have not adopted a new one.
I guess the question before the board is, fairly straightforward, and that's, we're using.
Before the policy committee, not the whole
Before the
board.
policy committee is we're using the superintendent, the NCSBA instrument, the state instrument now. And so do we want to adopt the NCSBA policy?
I did have one question before answering that question, if I could. Because, and maybe I'm just not reading this properly, but on page 3 of 4, it doesn't seem to be following what I think is supposed to be happening. Where it says prior to the regular board meeting in May, the board attorney shall compile numerical scores from the individual evaluations instruments submitted by board members. The superintendent shall provide. So it's not the board attorney then, but it's the superintendent who shall provide to the board members the average numerical scores and also the comments made by board members. To me, it should be the board attorney. Is that not correct?
That's correct. Attorney Shive?
Can whoever's controlling the screen scroll down to that language?
Page 2 of 4.
Page 3 of 4.
3 or 4.
3 or 4, I'm sorry.
At the top.
In that first paragraph, where it says, "The superintendent shall provide the board members the average numerical scores and also comments made by board members, but without the author's name." To me, that would be you, not the superintendent giving it to us. That
This
doesn't-
is,
that
and this is
doesn't-
So I
the
don't,
policy.
how did we end up with this, the red line version with this language in here? I thought that we were going to go with the straight School Boards Association policy language, and this seems to be a carryover from the previous policy.
I don't know.
And
That
Glenn,
was-
you're absolutely correct. When
that was
I
my
pulled out,
understanding.
when I pulled out policy 1820, this, what we got, it looked, what McKenna did for us in the very beginning when we were going through all the policies, she looked at the NCSBA and then she looked compared to our own policies and put in, she struck out things that didn't do what we were already doing. So we do not have to go with these strikeouts. This was her attempt to combine our old policy 1820 with this. So we can say whatever we want. If we want to follow the NCSBA as it's written, where, and they don't talk about averages, they talk about the medians and they talk about the scores. So there's
So,
not, yeah.
So I think that, I mean, again, it's the board's pleasure, but if we're gonna go with, it seems to me that if we're gonna go with the state tool and we're gonna go with the NCSBA policy, then we should do that and not use this strikeout language, because this does not follow the state process. When it talks about an average numeric score, that's not part of the state process. And I mean, I also would just say, I mean, having been part of the numerous superintendent evaluations, tying yourself to this incredibly strict timeline, you never know what's going to happen in a given year. And then you've got an issue where you're out of compliance with board policy. If there's, what if there's some major natural disaster in April and for whatever reason, the Tuesday in April, you're able to comply with that. The level of detail, I think, gets more problems than solutions.
And I would like to echo that, is if we are going to use the NCSBA's knowledge and experience and try and use best practices from across the state, I would suggest that we use the NCSBA policy as it was written and not try and wordsmith it into backing us into a corner.
So at this point, then, I would entertain a motion to adopt policy 7085 without the amended language.
7805. I think you said 7085.
7805, without the amended language.
Long form.
Yes, without the amended language. So the state standard without the amended language.
The NCSBA
Yes,
standard
yes,
as written.
without the amended language.
I'm confused.
This one. We're going to take out all of the
red
strikeouts.
language, okay,
Yes, well,
okay.
not,
I'm
we're
asking
going to
for it.
eliminate the new red language and take out the strikeouts.
And then
Okay,
from the
there's a
letter-
motion to adopt that policy without amended language. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any
Oh,
discussion?
the only other thing, that way, I made a note to myself on, oh, no, never mind. It had to do with, if there was a conflict with the board's, with the superintendent's contract and what this policy is. But this policy, as the NCSBA wrote it, doesn't speak to that at all. So we're good. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Policy 7805 passes unamended.
For the first reading for the August board meeting?
Yes.
And so this is one that we have to put out there 30 days and then vote on it in September.
Yes.
Okay. Just so that everybody watching at home, and then other board members, when we talk about it, that's how that goes.
So my question again was, so under B, because it's struck in, it's language that was struck out, and then
We're putting
there's
in,
language that's put in, but the language that's put in,
we're taking out.
you're taking that. So it's all the red is removed.
All the red that's not struck out is gone, all the red that is struck out is
It's
back in.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if you went in there like
I need
accept
to-
changes, then the stuff with the line through it would show up as black, and then
Okay.
the stuff with, in red underlined would show up as gone.
And the reason we're doing it that way is because we can't do anything simply.
I just didn't understand why that was struck out.
Because they were using, McKenna used this policy, our old policy, and was trying to merge them. So she struck out the things that looked similar.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is policy 2660, board appointments to outside committees. Ms. Craybill?
Yes, so, all right, so I would like to, I've got a couple policies, and I'm gonna need a little bit of input, obviously from my colleagues sitting over there to the left. And I would ask that we don't do these policies, we don't vote on them individually until after we've had a chance to talk about them all. So this review of committees has been going on for a year and a half. And we haven't really done much with it except just sort of feel our way around. So what I'm bringing to this committee today is policy 2230, which is the overall explanation of board committees, policy 2660, board appointments to outside committees, and policy 2670, the Business Advisory Council. And so what we need to do is not only clean up these policies, but we have to have what is in our policy, what is on our website on the page that Ms. Joy showed us a long time ago, we have to have those things match up. And so, and right now, they don't necessarily. So if we can start first, go backwards with policy 2660, the Business Advisory Council. I'm sorry, 2670. Because depending on what we decide from that, we might include it in 2330, doing 2230. So, Dr. Faison, if you and Ms. Futrell want to lead us in that, that'd be helpful.
Okay. Good morning. I am
morning.
going to start, and Mrs. Futrell will jump in and answer any questions that you have. We have a few suggested changes for policy 2670. First, you will see that we want to add CTE in the title. So it would be CTE Business Advisory Council. I'm sorry, you don't have what I'm looking at.
Yeah, because I sent you the one that marked up, and that's my fault.
No,
Jim, do you have
okay.
that marked
Kim,
up
you don't
one?
have the markup one? You have the marked up
Do you have the
copy?
marked up one?
Okay.
Okay, if I send it to you, can you, that's too hard? Okay. Let me send it to you right now. So you could,
Okay.
sorry. I wish I could just do my nose. Emails to Kim. Okay, it's coming.
Thank you, ladies. So you will see that we have, we're suggesting to add the name CTE, and we probably will actually spell that out and then put CTE in parentheses. We are also asking to change the number of members to 11, to make one of the members a board member, and in New Hanover, one of our district career and technical education program director. Currently, that would be Ms. Futrell, and to add a Chamber of Commerce person or president or designee. And I know Mrs. English has been talking to Mrs. Futrell, and she's very excited about that. So that is the actual red line changes that we have for the policy. I think there are some questions, but those are the red line changes that we have. They're very few, but I think they're very impactful.
So my question when I brought this to you for discussion was, do we need a separate policy for this council, or can we include that in policy 2230 as one of the advisory councils that we already have?
Ms. Futrell, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
I'm thinking it might be a state mandate that we have a CTE policy, but I'm gonna let you address that. I'm not sure.
Yes, it's actually a Perkins requirement. It's written in legislation that we should have a CTE Business Advisory Council.
Okay, so then what I'll do is I'll put that into as a number in the Business Advisory Council, and we'll refer to this policy.
Okay.
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 So that was good. And then just out of curiosity, who is the leader of this? Is this is that Ms. Futrell? Like, so is our subject matter
Yes.
expert
Yes.
or the career and technical director?
She is our expert.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and then the other one was just more semantics. So
Are you sure? She's here. She can ask you any questions you guys have.
well, I was curious but this is not really in policy, but my suggestion of adding the chamber was to make sure that we had people on this council that were representative of the industries that we've already had studies done that is most impactful. So I guess I didn't say in there how they're selected. You know, there's a selection process, how many go on and off, but is there a selection process to make sure that we get good representative industry people?
Okay. Ms. Futrell, you want to speak to your selection process?
Yes. It's really working with the chamber and looking at the pathways that we offer. That is really what drives it and related over to the workforce, the industry. So we do it really by recruiting. And if a member is interested and we have not recruited them, then they would just simply send a letter to myself and the board chair, the board chair of the advisory council to express their interest. And it's voted upon through the council.
Okay.
Mr. Wilbur?
And I've actually had the privilege of attending my first day, one of her meetings. And it is definitely representation of our community and the businesses here. And so she does a great job with that.
Well, I'm sure given that the chamber has been coming to us with just innovative idea after innovative idea and partnerships, it's like, we got to make sure that we got this solid, and it sounds like we do, so appreciate that.
Mr. Wilbur?
All right, thank you. First of all, I'd like to tell you that I really feel like this is a very, very well-worded document. The policy is well-written. And to the point, I'd actually like to talk to my fellow board members about B, subsection 2A, actually talks about what I would like to see in policy 2230, where it clearly defines how you get, I've had so many people, not in this policy, but in other committees, say, how do I get on that? I would love to be on that committee. How can I get on that committee? This is actually extremely well written. That tells you exactly how you can get on there, how you can apply to be on there. I think I would love to take this subsection and put it under every other board committee so that it is very clear to everyone. We've always talked about the word transparency. Transparent, how you can get on this committee. If you really want to be part of this committee, here's how you do it.
So, Mr. Wilbur, that's a good point, because we are going to be talking about that in 2230. So,
exactly, that's perfect. Okay. Well done. 2 thumbs up.
Thank you guys very much.
All right.
Excited for it.
Okay.
Vote on it?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Futrell.
Thank you, Ms. Futrell.
Thank you.
Enjoy the conference.
Thank you.
Okay, so.
Nice job.
Yeah.
All right, policy 2230, Ms. Craybill.
All right, okay, so 22, let's hold that one off. All right, so 22, first, and let's go to 2660 next. which is board appointments to outside committees. On there, we need to, in letter B, board appointments to outside committees and boards, we need to strike the Hannah Block Historic USO Building and Community Arts Center Committee because that committee has been disbanded. So that was my only one there, and it was already answered based on, it might be answered based on something coming up. So that's my only thing there, is just to take that one out. Yes?
Okay. I just had a question because you had asked me this question yesterday, and we were kind of joking about it at one point, but when I was put on the Legion Stadium Committee, I think there was only one. So has that been changed, or is that the way it's always been?
This is the way it's always been.
Okay.
And when I was going back through looking at it last year, I just assumed that you had a partner on that team with you. So, and so that's why I am putting some onus on you right now, if you would help us out, to find out from the Legion Stadium Commission, because they run that, we don't.
Right.
Are we required to have two? Or, because maybe this is a typo from our policy, so.
Can I join in?
Oh, yeah, you may. Eddie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I attended the last Legion Stadium Commission meeting, and they do ask for 2 board members.
Okay.
And according to the commission, it was, or it is, Mr. Wildebohr and Ms. Justice.
Gotcha.
Currently.
Okay, all right, so then we will remedy that. We're gonna, because I'm gonna be perhaps changing some of our board assignments for the new school year, so we'll make sure that we have that. We don't want to be out of compliance, so thank you for that. So, Mr. Wildebohr, you have no task. Okay. All right, so we'll get that fixed. So that's policy 2616. And so the next thing, now we come to the big overarching one, is policy 2230. So if you look at that, I wanted to, because we've had to do this in policy, in letter A, paragraph 2, where it says that the chairperson of the board on an annual basis selects, assigns board members to committees. And I wanted to add in there, can be changed if necessary by the chair during the year. There have been, if somebody doesn't want to be on the committee anymore, if it's not working out with their schedule anymore, all different kinds of reasons why. So I wanted to add that in. In 1, 2, 3, the third paragraph down, about the middle, you can see where it says the superintendent or designee. And in parentheses, I wanted to just make it clear on what the practice that we're following is. The designee is a district subject matter expert, SME. So wanted to know if that was appropriate, Dr. Faust.
I mean, we always do that.
Do you always do? I mean, that's our practice.
I would never put someone on there that could help you.
Right, okay. So we do that. And then moving down through there, I'm adding in, this is all suggestions, and ensuring that accurate and timely information is available to the committee during its deliberation of issues. Subcommittees may be formed to enhance and expedite the work of the committee. And so we've had questions about that on some of our committees, so I wanted to put that in. Were you?
So I just had a question. So does that need to be, so SMU, does that need to be in there?
Well, my opinion is yes, that's why I added it, because when you look at how we're setting up, we need a district contact. We need a chairperson of committees. And some of if the board chair, the board committees, we are chair. The board advisory committees, we are not chair. One of your subject matter experts is the chair.
Right.
So that's what that was there for.
No, I was saying they need to be spelled out in red. So I said the superintendent or designee shall assist the
Yeah,
chairperson.
I was just begging for clarification. If you don't think we need that,
Because
we already had Mr. Boyer sort of talk about a subject matter expert. Let's get a student. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was clear that those people over there or their designees are our subject matter experts. But I can easily go, without that. Okay. All right. Then moving on into the next.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to bring out that, as Ms. Crable just mentioned, and we just talked about the other policy, I would like to further define that first sentence in the second paragraph, and I have no problem with the first part of it, where it says the chairperson of each standing committee and the board members of that committee will be named. I mean, so that means that the chairperson is naming the whole of, like, the policy committee. And I mean, I think that really, we should let the chairperson of that standing committee name, or at least have, again, we need to have a clear, concise method, and I think it needs to be more than the chairperson just saying, you're on the committee, you're on the committee, you're on the committee, you know. I think we need, as the other one had, like an application process, even like our student voice, where they have an application process where somebody, an outside person in the community says, hey, I really want to be on X, Y, or Z committee, here's how you can do it. As this reads, at least in my humble opinion, it says the chairperson either can say yes or no, and that's it. And I think that maybe the committee chairperson makes sense, but the whole of that committee, I think there needs to be an application or some kind of a process to be able to get a lot of things we've been talking about, diversity and getting, you know, a lot of people that are, you know, number one, have the time to do it, number two, are interested in doing it, and actually want to have their voice as part of that. So I think that's.
Just to clarify though, this is how our board members, only our board members are appointed.
It doesn't say that. It says
This is
members
board
of the
committee, board standing committees.
The
This is-
board members
Okay.
on that committee. So and again, that's back in policy
committee.
duties
Okay,
of the
okay.
chair. That is what the duties,
Yeah.
and again, just so folks who are watching know, that the board chair solicits that information, that interest from other board members. What do you want to do? So that we
Yeah,
can get
I stand
people.
corrected. I was reading board members as part of that board, not.
Okay.
My mistake. I'm
All
sorry.
right, not a problem.
Also, I'm just gonna say, and can be changed if necessary during the year. It says that a couple times. The chair already has that authority. I don't think we need to add that in several places. The chair has always had that authority. That is the authority of the chair. We've seen chairs remove people, add people in the middle of the year, so I would not add that. I think it'll give a false impression to the community.
Okay, well, the only
Sorry, Ms. Walker.
reason that I tossed that in is because we did have controversy over the ability of the board chair to do that when a person had been removed. I'm happy to take it out.
What would you say the procedures should be noted in here? Because when I was removed from a committee, it wasn't brought to the board in front of everyone to do. It should be done in the open. I think the process is to annually place somebody, you announce them. If there's a change, that should also be announced and the reasons why. Because I don't think that's, you know, if we're talking about just removing board members because you don't want them on a board, that's one thing. If a board member comes to you and says, I would like to change, that's something different too. I've seen both scenarios.
Okay, I can take it out, not a big deal. As long as we are on the understanding, the board chair has that authority and responsibility to make sure that the appropriate people are on
But it
each
should be done
committee.
in the open. I think it should be done at a meeting. If someone's removed, it should be announced at the next meeting.
For removals only.
Removals,
Okay.
yes.
I have
Not a
no
big deal.
problem with it. Yeah, I have
I
no
can
problem
take it out.
announcing it. Yeah.
Not a big deal. All right, so the Budget Development Committee, the little small ones were, that I put, that where it says has my initials, that was in comments, but my question to this committee was, do we need to have a Budget Development Committee when the whole board is part of that? And to me, a committee is, like if we had a smaller group that heard it initially, talked with the other people on the board, and then we presented, the budget committee said, we've had a chance to look at it, we think this is good, or we've had a chance to look at it and we think we need some changes. So I mean, all the reasons why that are listed are good, but do we need to have committees that it's just everybody?
So I can.
Help me out.
So
Yeah.
what I would like is, yes, so that the burden doesn't fall on the superintendent and the finance officer or the CFO. Typically, what I've experienced is that there is a committee, and so you're presenting to the committee, and then the committee then takes it to the board. And then when we go over the budget, the committee is sharing, this is why it's not a superintendent, even though it's by law, it says the superintendent will present his or her budget to the board, but it's a committee, and you understand going in, this is what we're doing versus, oh, it's a superintendent, this is what he wants. It's not what the superintendent wants, like, this is what's best for the organization.
And I brought that up because I sit on other boards and I've watched other boards where they have a smaller subgroup that hears it first, so that we're not always like 7 of us going up and down the aisle. So that's what I would like to suggest, is that we have, the committee works with the superintendent and staff to facilitate. The committee is comprised of what, 3 board members, kind of like we have
No.
in policy?
No, absolutely not. No, the board as an entity is working in a different capacity when it's developing a budget. And we're sitting down there and having our budget development work sessions, and we are acting as a committee of the whole. Ever since I've been on the board, we've done it as a committee of the whole. I know they had a previous board where they had guys with 30 years on that board, and so they did dial it down and say, okay, we have 3 or 4 members. But I think it's important to have all board members assisting the superintendent and the staff in that budget process. So I think it's important to keep it as a committee of the whole.
Mr. Wildebohr, do you have a comment?
Well, I can see both sides. I see the smaller committee. I think that what Dr. Faust is recommending is having a smaller committee that would bring it back to the whole board, not the whole board the whole time. Am I correct? That is what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in that set, it's not, everyone's voice is heard, if we're going to go with the voice. So it's not that, it's just the superintendent. So, and I'll say that taking from the last time that we did this budget, we redid it, 4 or 5 times. And we weren't hearing, like we would do it based on what we heard. We had a committee in place after we had heard the whole board. So sorry, I'm taking your time. No, so in the initial, we did the work session. So you do the work session and you find out everything from everyone. And then it's like, okay, these 3 or 2 people from the board are representatives of the board, and they sit down and they hear, this is where we are, this is what we're starting. Now input, okay, given input there. Then when it's time to present, just like with any, you're also experts that are talking, for this reason, this is why we had to do this. For this reason, this is why we had to do it. And it's coming from not only the superintendent and the CFO, but it's also coming from that committee. And that's typical when we have our committee meetings, that's how it should work. That then the board is able to answer questions for other board members.
So it's very similar to what we're doing right now with the policy committee.
Right.
Policy, group of 3, that it will, we don't make the final call, we bring it still back to them. Okay.
But we have to.
My point
And we
out,
attempt to vet it a little bit or get feedback, but Ms. Walker, going to add in?
Well, I mean, I kind of like both sides of the argument at the same time. I agree with Mr. Boyer, like the board, and we all have different questions. We all have different things we want to ask. But I think that what I would like to see in developing the committee description here is some timelines and some actual, we meet this date, we meet this month or whatever, because the longer we have leading up to the end of the process, the less confusion we'll have at the end. And I think every board member's opinion matters when it comes to budget development and priorities, so.
So to that point, I mean, we can add it here, certainly. When we get to E, that will address some of that a little bit. And some of our board, if you notice on the website, when you look at it, some of them have like a whole nother webpage that they go to, and some of them have like 4 lines. So that is my goal, is that we are all, the information we're putting forward is all not exactly the same, but it's similar, so that we have, an SME assigned, we have a board member assigned, we have the goals, we have, timelines, and some of them already have that. So we can put that in here if we want to do that.
So if we decide to go with the whole board, you could have a board person lead the committee, like you could have a chair. I mean, that could lead the questioning and maybe kind of help streamline some communication. I mean, because you said refer to E, and E talks about having a chair and selecting. I mean, I don't know. I mean, would it be helpful to still have the whole board as a committee, but like have a chair to kind of help facilitate the questions? Would it make it less confusing? Would it be? That's just my suggestion. Maybe it's something to think about.
I would point out that there's a possibility that going into our next budget season, you're going to have the most senior board members with simply 2 years of board experience. And I think in that environment, it's a better idea to maintain a committee of the whole, because there's just going to be a lot of questions. And going through a budget process for the first time, it's overwhelming. Going through it for the 4th time is overwhelming. So, I just want us to keep that in mind, that it's not about what's best for us. It's about the board in perpetuity. And as it moves forward, I think having that committee of the whole is really helpful.
Well, on that line then, do we need to have a committee? Because the superintendent is charged with, along with the chief financial officer, to putting together a budget and working with us. So
A balanced budget.
a balanced
Yes.
budget. So I'm thinking, do we even need a budget development committee as a standing committee? Because we don't meet. It's called, you meet at a board meeting,
You don't
at a
meet-
work session.
It's a work session, and again, I go back to us acting in a very different capacity. It's not us acting as the Board of Education. We're asking questions in a different capacity. We're having conversations it's a different dynamic. It is a committee, and we are working in that committee with the superintendent to develop a budget that we then present to the whole board at a board meeting.
So
I
we're
do
having a
think it's different.
subcommittee meeting because we have not had any of those. We've all budget discussions were on this dais at a regular board meeting that lasted an hour or
I think
more.
the first two, we were down here, several we were down there. No.
We have not discussed budget down there. We had one work session
Okay, well, I believe
that was part of a regular
yes, I
board
think you
meeting.
need a budget development committee in your policy.
I think that's why I was saying to his point, to like make it a little more clear about when we meet and a timeline. Like, because if we have to start budget discussion as a committee in February, let's start meeting earlier. I just feel like it's not very clear what the development committee does. You know, you're saying it's just all of us all the time, just, willy-nilly up here, really
And
it should
yeah.
be a committee.
And if you look on there too, there is, in the old language, that was, you met in, I think it was November, and then January and February. That is when this committee met. And then the committee was no longer. It was, but again, that's not a committee. That is all of us saying that we're committing to chunking out a time at this board meeting, or something. So all right, I'll look at that, and, when we're looking at those lists on there. Yes?
Mr. Wildebohr.
And I do apologize for my misspeaking before. I found where I was looking before, and it is in section E. And I love that this says this, determine member length, recruit and maintain diverse committee membership using a common membership application and recruiting. But again, I think we need to take some of the wording, even in the other one, that talks about, I think every committee should have the same, it shouldn't be, well, my committee is going to have somebody for 5 years, and your committee is going to have somebody for 2 years. I think that should be common ground, as well as, how do we recruit and maintain a diverse committee? So I think even that needs to be, if we're going to say it, we need to say it, and like I say, that's, as I was saying before in section A, the second paragraph, here's where I should have been saying it, but I think that really needs to be further defined so that we, when somebody asks, Mr. Wildebohr, how do I get on, the Title IX committee? I honestly don't know. I guess you maybe reach out to, Mr. Lewis and talk to him. I think we need to be able to, so people can see, I want to join a committee. How do I do it? Is there an application process? What is the application process? How do I get to the application process? When will I hear back? Because I've heard from some people, I applied, or talked to somebody 3 times and never heard back. I think that I would love to see that further defined and being, more transparent so that so people know as they move forward, is it, and I think it really doesn't, I don't think, Title IX should be different than EDI, different than, any other committee. I think we should have a common ground where
That's what I'm suggesting here.
Okay.
That's what I'm suggesting.
I don't
is
see
that,
it,
Well, I haven't written the wording.
Oh, okay.
It's not up to me to write the
Okay.
wording.
Okay.
It's up to the subject matter experts for the advisory committees, and it's up to board standing committee chairs to get together and put that wording together.
Perfect.
What I'm just saying is that in E is that we have this commonality, and we obviously can work with our communications department to help us get word out on when the recruiting window is open.
Awesome.
Just like we do with PTAs. And you can join any time, perhaps, but maybe you can only join at certain times. But yeah, so that is in there. So the detail, if we want to see that detail in policy, I'm happy to do the legwork and put that in. Or if we can go forward with this as our guidelines, we can add that in as not necessarily part of policy or part of policy, and we can amend again.
Well, and I would just like to say, because we've talked about it, I know you brought up about a year ago or almost a year ago.
This is what we decided a year ago. I just took my notes from the last time we got together and wrote all that down.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. I think we haven't further defined it in a year, so I think we need to have it So it is transparent for everybody to see, and, okay, this is how, I want to join this committee. Here's simply how I do it, and I don't have to, contact 4 different people and ask 4 different questions, and, and again, I think, as you just said, commonality is going to be huge, because it shouldn't be, my committee, we do it this way, your committee, you do it this way, this committee, I never change.
Well, that was my point, that it needs to be common.
I agree with you.
Okay, so the next the next board standing committee is Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Right now, my comments on that one was, didn't have any.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a reason why we call it equity, diversity, inclusion versus diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI?
That's what we called it when we started it several years ago. And so, but we can change that name if we want.
I don't want to be the one, I'm just asking because in the government world, it's called DEI.
It's called DEI, and or it's, some people have the I in front, or EI. I mean, it just depends.
Okay.
Everybody calls it something different. So, I didn't have any suggestions there. Family Communications Committee, you didn't see that because I forgot to do the strikeout. Suggesting that we delete the Family Communications Committee and replace it with the Superintendent Parent Advisory, if that is something that the school system can support. All of the things that were written there as goals to begin with, we put together and we accomplished and met those goals. And so now we're on to a new phase. So I wanted to suggest deleting this committee and replacing it with the Superintendent Parent Advisory. So is that something that you can do? And then that would be help managed through the communications department like you do with the other advisories? Okay. So, comments on that?
Deleting it or renaming it?
No, to replace it with this Superintendent Parent Advisory, because what we have so the parents have a chance to give input. It would be the same people coming to the Family Communications Committee, or we would have a list, like you'll see on here, a list of committee members, so you know who to talk to. And none of these meetings are closed. I mean, if you want to come, you just, you can come. But these are the people, like we got back to Ms. Varnum's point, was we got to have some commitment, on some of these committees, so people that will show up. A Family Communications Committee, there really is no commitment.
Yeah. So if
Josh,
I could,
you wanna,
Ms. Crable, this was my recommendation for this committee and board's consideration. I think, like she said, that the necessity for that committee represented a gap in both staffing and capability. And I think since then we've filled that gap. And so looking at how to bring the most value to our stakeholders and specifically our parents, this is the proposal. So I know that Superintendent Truitt at the state level has started something very similar recently, and it was very well received. And so we would look at beginning middle of August, similarly rolling out the application criteria, Mr. Wildebohr establishing exactly what that looks like, ensuring that we have appropriate representation of parents, and then the opportunity for them to sit down with the superintendent directly, like we have with other committees, and provide their input on policies, practices, things like that. What it had morphed into, as we were still trying to keep it alive, is almost like a subject matter expert evening or night or committee situation where we would almost town hall style be answering questions. That was beneficial for a period, but I think we've moved past that. So I think now folks would hopefully embrace the opportunity to meet with regularly the superintendent and kind of provide that input. So that's where it's coming from.
And one of the big projects of that committee, which we don't need necessarily anymore, was revamping our communications on our presence on the website, where members of that committee took a chunk and they looked at it on their phones, on their iPads, on their computers, and the communications department is just filling that gap, right away.
So,
Ms. Walker?
I'm confused. Is this already a standing committee?
It is.
No, I meant Superintendent Advisory.
No, he's going to create one, starting mid-August.
And it's going to have 2 board members on it?
No, we're not going to have a Family Communications Committee anymore.
Right, but I'm saying is this committee had 2 board members on it with.
Right.
Right, let me finish that. Let me finish my question. But this is basically just doing away with this whole parent communications thing and 2 board members. So this is
Number 3 is going away.
Why would it be a board committee then?
Yes, ma'am. That's
not a board committee.
That's the
I'm
distinction.
suggesting we not have a board committee.
Okay, so we would wipe that out completely.
We would say number 3 would be X.
But what are the downsides to that? Because I know you say you're on this committee right now,
Yeah,
right?
mhm.
And you're saying there's nothing to work on?
There is stuff to work on, but what what we have evolved from the people is we worked on the stuff they wanted to work on. And so and all we did was advise the superintendent. So if they can just go and advise the superintendent directly, we're taking out the middleman.
Yeah.
I think the
don't know if I
committee,
like that.
to Josh's point, the committee arose because there was a gap, because the board wasn't getting feedback, the community wasn't getting feedback, and there was this communications gap. What we're saying now is that gap has been filled with appropriate and effective channels, and there's an opportunity now to go directly to the superintendent rather than have the board have a committee that goes to the superintendent. So to Ms. Crable's point, we're cutting out the middleman and having more effective, streamlined communication.
And Ms. Adams and I have talked with Josh about this, and some of the members who were on, and frankly, because we'd already met that and we didn't have a lot of things to talk about, a lot of members dropped off of that committee, so we had very few committee members. And then some of them actually wanted to give their parent input on other committees. So, which was even, more key for them to be able to give input directly to EDI or directly to curriculum. So that's how they felt that their time would be better used. So a lot of people were leaving the committee to go to more specific committees because the specific thing we created this committee for is gone.
So how long has the committee been a committee? Do we know the history of this committee? I mean, you gave
Ms.
me a-
Adams started it when she was on the board, maybe 2018 or 19.
It started in February of 2019, I
Yeah.
believe. It was right when she got on the board.
And it also, during the pandemic, we really didn't meet other than to get feedback to the superintendent on things that were happening pandemic related. And then, and after that, we haven't gotten back into, other than making it more of just a parent information night, where each department came and talked about the things that they did and were doing. But we're past that too, unless, we think we need to do that.
I would love to see a write-up of exactly what this advisory committee does, because I don't have a copy of that in front of me unless I've missed it somewhere.
It's the same thing, well, you can talk about it, it's the same thing that the teacher advisory committee does, the classified advisory committee.
Well, my point is, we're moving to strike a board committee that has 2 board members on it for family communications, because you're saying there's no need, but to replace it with something that I don't even know, I don't have it in front of me, I don't know.
Well, it wouldn't be, what my thoughts are, it's not a direct replacement, it's what we're gonna do business differently. So we're not like filling this in.
Right, but again, I say, it's called Superintendent Advisory Committee, but I don't have the write-up on it. Josh, maybe you can send it to board members to let us know kind of you explained it pretty well, but I don't have it in front of me.
Sure. Right, so the advisory committees, be it principal, teacher, classified advisory committees, oftentimes we will, plan out the overall themes that we'd like to hit throughout the year, starting at the school year in August and take us through the year. But of course, topics that are top of mind will dominate that sometimes. For example, the classified committee's outstanding and candid conversations and feedback from the classified committee. But as you can imagine, it revolved around budget for about 3 straight months. And it was an opportunity for them to come. And although we may have proposed we were going to talk about X, Y, or Z, it revolved around budget. If they needed that information, we were able to have those conversations and send back. So it's malleable out of necessity for that reason, but it's simply nothing more than a regularly scheduled meeting with proposed topics that we can shift on the fly, and an opportunity for these groups to hear from the quote-unquote horse's mouth and then provide direct input. And so there's nothing written down is what I'm saying. Ms. Walker, I could provide minutes from previous committee meetings or proposals, but it's essentially just that.
Right, I guess I'm just leery to kind of strike out a complete committee that had a need for just in lieu of something else that I'm not, that's all. I wouldn't feel comfortable just doing it, because you're on there, who else is on there?
Adams.
Oh, okay, I see. You guys just, okay. All right.
Okay, so I think there is at least a consensus moving forward to strike that language out and see what the board wants to do, but
Yeah, so go strike it, and then, and of course, we talk to the whole board.
Yep.
Okay, moving down into student scholarships for future teachers, number 4. Had a question, Dr. Faust, I wanted to get clarity on where it says we provide 4 scholarships. want to put the words at least 4? Or does this tie us to, we give 4?
Well, this, it always depends on how much money
Right.
is there. This is controlled by the commission. And at any given time, they can choose not to give. I think it's a total of, 51? Ashley, do you remember the grand total? Yeah, there's a grand total that you can't exceed. But, so the total.
Per year.
Right, but it's
That we can give, that we pay each year.
7 times 4, so it's $28,000 for the one individual. But what I mean is that they give a dollar amount.
That we spend each year because people are already in the system.
Yeah, but there's a number, but
That's why I want to put at least 4, because I think we had money in the budget for 8 this year, and we talked about at one point having.
Budgets change, and
Right.
my recommendation would just be,
let's say,
awards the student scholarship for future teachers to New Hanover County high school seniors annually.
That's it.
I don't think we need to do anything else.
We don't want to have a number in there at all.
I wouldn't say.
Okay, then let's take that out. Okay. In that same one, I wanted to change the wording of what we call our administrative assistant to the board to board clerk. Isn't that what her title is? Whenever I go to other meetings, people talk about their board clerk. So that was just a semantic. Okay, moving on down to the policy committee. That is us. We work, this committee of 3, works with the staff in development of the policies, because we don't write them all. We get input from you guys, and we have 3 board members there. The legislative committee was one we'd already voted on last year. The purpose of the committee is to serve as a liaison between the Board of Education and local and state elected officials, so as to enhance their awareness of issues as they pertain to our local public education system. Committee will be comprised of 3 board members, preferably at least 1 from each party. 1 board member on this committee will also serve as the board's liaison to the NCSBA per policy 2650, liaison to School Board Association, and follow NCSBA legislative and other activity and report highlights to the entire board. So that was one we already talked about. I'm just putting it into the policy. Title IX committee. We added some, I asked Jarrell for some advice on this one, and you see at the end, this committee works with the superintendent and staff to ensure that students are not denied equal access to educational programming and opportunities on the basis of sex, and there are 2 board members assigned to that. We had talked at one point about incorporating Title IX committee into the EDI committee as a working subcommittee, but put that on hold until we have a chief equity officer to facilitate that move. So I'm recommending that we just stay as we are right now.
I have one point.
Yes, please.
And I just realized that on that Title IX committee, it says student, I would broaden that up to student, employees, visitors.
Commits with the student, staff,
Student, staff, visitors, more encompassing. More
and community members, community partners?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what our committee is anyway, so.
Ms. Grable, before we continue with this policy, we only have 10 minutes left. I don't know that.
I'm almost done.
I just need to make sure, Mr. Lewis, the Title IX policies, are these federally mandated changes, or are these things that we have to pass today?
These are not federally mandated changes. These changes are to smooth out our Title IX process.
Okay.
Make it quicker. One of them is a regulation for the definitions under our Title IX policy. I was unaware that regulations had to be adopted. I thought that they were kind of in-house. So last board meeting, I learned that they had to be adopted as well. So that I do want to adopt the definitions under Title IX. So I guess if there's one thing that needs to be done soon, the Administrative Regulation 1725 would be.
Okay, I think that it would be good then to hold this until.
I will, and I am going to, I think what I'm going to do is put it on as a work session, because it seems like there's a lot of board input that's going to happen. So I'll put it on as a work session for the 4th time, and we'll see if we can't get it going, because I really wanted to assign people to start the school year. So I may be just assigning people to start the school year, and we have to invoke that board chair privilege of changing.
Okay, and we can
right.
definitely put it back on there on the 9th.
All
We have
right,
a
so,
board meeting on the
but
2nd.
before we do that, can we go ahead and let, vote on what we want to do with 2660 and with 2670?
I have them down to move forward to the board to consider amendments.
Okay,
And 2670 I have for first reading.
why?
Oh, it's a new committee,
It's not?
It's not?
Nope,
Okay.
it's already in there.
No, cool. So
We
2670.
adopted it on October 16, 2020.
2670 and 2660 will move forward for the board to consider amendments.
All in favor? Do we vote on that?
We will at the end of the,
Okay, okay.
okay, so, Mr. Lewis, can you please take us through the language?
Yeah, so if you look at policy 1725R, the regulation, that is referring to the definitions that are mandated under Title IX. We have been following these definitions since we updated our Title IX policies. However, they had just never been adopted. And so I want to make sure that we are following our policies and procedures by adopting these definitions that we use. We haven't changed. I haven't changed anything. These are the same definitions we've used from the beginning.
Okay.
Which one are we looking at, Jarrell? I'm sorry, we're looking at the R?
Correct, yeah.
1736.
Page 53 and 54.
No, I know what the sections are, but there's 3 policies where the same wording is inserted. So which
It
one are
is
we looking at?
the
All of them?
R.
Okay.
1725R. So there was no change or anything to the definitions. We just need to adopt the definitions that we've been following, essentially.
1725R, correct?
Correct.
Do you want a motion?
Yeah, I would like a motion
I'll make a
to,
motion, we accept Mr. Lewis's recommendations on passing 1725R. We'll move it
okay.
on to the board.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion.
And technically, there's 3 numbers in that policy, just so we're clear on that.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
And we're moving that to first reading
Correct.
That will be moved onto the policy
because we've
for
not
first
seen it
reading.
before. Okay.
However, I will probably, Mr. Lewis, would you like me to ask the board to waive first reading so that we can be in compliance here?
Yes.
So I will ask the board to waive first reading on that policy. And so we can adopt it. And again, there are no changes to practice or procedure. That's correct, right?
No, there are not, and these definitions are provided from the federal government, Department of Education, so we really can't stray too far from them. We just need to adopt the policies that the definitions that we've been utilizing for our investigations.
Okay. Oh, all right. So, I think we don't have any time.
Are we going to do 1725 and 1726 while we're here? Because there's really not, it's very short, right?
Yes, these are just to
Do you think you
streamline
can
our
get through them
processes.
in like 5 minutes?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Lewis? All right, yeah, let's do it.
So if you look at policy 1726, 4036, 7237, this is our Title IX grievance procedure. And what I am wanting to do with this policy is add an informal resolution procedure. This will allow us to speed up and streamline our Title IX process for certain investigations. And so what I've done is add the language for an informal resolution process. If you scroll down to page
16, at the very end, letter H.
There's some changes on 7.
Where are we?
Let me see where I'm sorry. 1 second. So the language, if you look at page 7 of 18 and 8 of 18, this is also streamlining our process to allow just the Title IX coordinator to allow the investigator, Mr. John Henry, conduct the investigations. In practice, we've already been doing this, But this is simply just takes out and who will investigate what, because we do this from central office perspective. So it takes out principals and things like that. So that's what that language is there, just saying that the Title IX investigator will conduct these investigations. Also moving forward, at the bottom, on page 18 of 18, there's some blue language at the bottom. This policy has already been adopted with the blue language. What I did was I borrowed from the policy. This policy was reviewed in February of 2022 to take into account updates from the Department of Education with cross-references. So there's language down there in the blue at the bottom, but that language has not been changed by me.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Wildebohr.
I just had a quick question. So please help me understand how this is going to speed up the process, because I'm all, and we've talked about it at length, I'm all about speeding up that process, but.
Yeah, so the biggest change is 16 of 18, that's the informal resolution process. So there are times where you have Title IX cases where someone has filed a formal complaint, and of course the Title IX process can take up to 120 days.
Yeah, it's crazy.
By the time we get to that point, facts have changed, individuals' mindsets have changed, and so the informal resolution process will allow us to mediate these complaints without having to actually find a student conduct policy violation. For example, if student A put a complaint in against student B at the beginning of a Title IX process, maybe 30 days down the line, they might have some agreement where they say, let's actually mediate this complaint, and maybe student B wants to accept responsibility and says, yes, I did do this, yes, I see my actions were wrong, therefore we can stop the investigation right there, work on and negotiate some type of student discipline if the parties agree to it. It provides us more robust response besides having to wait all the way to the end of the Title IX investigation. So that's what that informal resolution process will do. And this language is actually provided by the North Carolina School Board Association when we adopted the Title IX policies at the very beginning in 2020, I believe. However, our district was not prepared to implement that because of the short time frame that we had from the Department of Education to implement these policies. So I took that language out, and now I think we are at the point to where we can adopt it. So,
Are there any questions from committee members? Board members? Anybody? Good, okay. Well, I think we are prepared then to have those put
And
forward.
how about
to the board.
1725?
the last policy, 1725, is just adding the language about informal resolution. So there are a couple of changes there that really just add informal resolution as an option. Looking at page 10 of 12, for example, it adds language about an informal resolution process. And page 11 of 12 also adds language about the informal resolution process outlined in policy 1726.
And on page 1.
And page 1 as
Yeah.
well. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm scrolling quickly, so I might have missed
No, I
something.
went through and highlighted where you have that in there.
Yes.
Any questions on that, those small changes? Just those 3 sentences, Mr. Lewis?
Correct.
Okay, any questions from board members? Okay, great. So I think both of those, all 3 of those can move forward to the board. One we'll ask to waive first reading, and the other 2 we have passed, so we will just ask the board to consider those amendments. Right on time. Mr. Lewis, well done. Clock management, it's a skill we should all learn. All right, so with that, I will ask for a motion first to move the following policies forward to the board to consider amendments. Policy 1726-4036-7237. Policy 1725-4035-7236. Policy 2660.
You missed one.
Which one?
1725.
R is not going forward for amendments. It is going on for first reading, which I will ask to waive.
Okay.
policy 2660, and policy 2670. Do I hear a motion?
Those are also for amendment.
Those two are for amendment as well. Do I hear a motion from the board to move those policies forward to the full board to consider amendments?
Make a motion to do that.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 I'll also consider a motion for policy 7085 to go on for first reading unamended.
Is it 7085 or 7805?
Actually,
No, it's not unamended. It's because there's a ton of amendments in there. We are my recollection is we are adopting the NCSBA policy as presented.
right, unamended, not amended. Right.
Unamended.
Yeah. So is there a policy to adopt it unamended?
I just did.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, any discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Isn't 1726?
We're getting to 17205. So I will also, at this time, consider a motion to adopt policy to put policy 1725-4035-7236R forward to the board with the intention of waiving first reading.
What, do we have to vote on that?
Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'm good.
Second? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That policy will be put forward. And finally, there was no action taken on policy 4004. That policy will be held in committee until next month.
As well as 2660.
What's that?
2660 is held in.
26.
No,
it was
the policies that are being held in committee are 4004, student voice,
Right.
and 2230, board committees.
Right, so those policies will be held in committee until next month, until August 9th. Okay, so at this time, it's everybody's favorite adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Yes.
All right, any opposed? We're adjourned.
Can we do 4 hours?
No, we can